if I go to stretch it right now, you're gonna hear it fight.
Mhm.
And that's how, like, you hear the person stretching, they're like,
Right.
"Ugh."
You hear that aching. Yeah.
Yes, and we can use more gentle ways to create hydration within these fluids to get them to move around and be less stagnant, and then also to palpate them deeply.
Watch what's happening. A force of nature. Hit 'em like lightning. Be the creator of the next big thing. We're the movers and shakers. We are the dreamers, the makers. We stand on top of equators. We are the limitless. Got the future, no papers. We are the innovators. We have the focus like lasers. You know we doing it big. Oh, this is major.
Greetings and welcome to this episode of the Compromised Alchemized podcast with your host, Dr. Neil Bolchandani. I'm really excited for the episode you're about to listen to. It's with Brooke from Musical Breathwork. What an enigma! What a resource! What a wealth of information! And I just had so much fun. I really love her knowledge, but it's really fun to see where someone comes from. She's got a history of being a professional opera singer and a professional golfer, but she's created these two amazing systems and protocols. One is called Fascia Flow, the other one is called Mighty Breath. So I'm really excited about that. Tune in too, because we delve into a lot more than just that. We talk about not just intuition, we talk about Brooke's personal legend, of course, and we just get into a lot of things that I think I'm really resonant with Brooke in terms of how she thinks, and really fun. So singing is a big topic. I'm a singer. I love singing. It's a passion of mine. I'm doing it more and more again. So I actually feel like I got so much out of this from one of you'll see that's a teaser to her personal legend. And yeah, there's a lot coming up too. I'm really excited to share about my membership coming up for families, people who want to ask Dr. Neil questions, you want to get more insight, and those of you who can't fly in, you can't make it here, or the one-to-one format isn't ideal, whether in person or virtual, and you want to be part of this monthly sort of group where we delve into a lot more of the nitty-gritty of cases. Like I'll be just sort of sneaking in my cosmic mandible course that I'm coming out with, and how to get a retrognathic mandible forward, how to extricate the fascia in the system so that it's allowed to happen. And then we can even talk about my floor 4 offering that's coming. But more than that, I just can't get enough of the collaborations that are coming. And Brooke and I talked about another episode, perhaps down the line, maybe in a few months, and I can't wait for that conversation. So without further ado, check out the show notes for some of those things that I mentioned that on my end I'm offering. Especially excited for what you all think of that. And then, of course, Brooke, most of you out there, it's like, do I need to do an intro because you know who she is? But she is the founder of Musical Breathwork. It's a pioneering method, tuning the body like an instrument, like using fascia release, breath science, and frequency. So, it's used by a lot of people, doctors, therapists, and peak performers, and it's used to regulate stress, restore flow, and activate gamma brainwaves. So she's all about unlocking resilience and reclaiming rhythm in a world out of tune. I don't think I need to say that twice. We know it. So what a resource, what a wonderful person to dialogue with us about, and I think you're going to enjoy.
Have the focus like lasers. You know we doing it big. Oh, this is major.
All right. Hi, Brooke. I am so happy to have this time with you on my podcast, the Compromised to Alchemized podcast. I've just loved your work. As soon as I saw Musical Breathwork through the Instagram profile of Mauro Zapatera, who I've collaborated with, I was like, I'm sold. I want to know more. But then I kept looking at what you were putting out there. I'm like, wow, there's so much more, from cymatics to fascia to fibrocytes, and your work and the way you study so much, but then the way that you are now guiding so many people. So I'm just really excited to have this conversation. And already what we've talked about before we hit record, I'm like so stoked. So thanks for being here with me and for talking with my people.
I appreciate the invitation. And after watching some of what you have put out there, I'm excited to see where our brains collide in space.
Yeah, that collision can be, I think, quite unpredictable. And yet at the same point or token or whatever, symbol we want to talk about, I feel like there's so many sync ups, there's so many link
Mhm.
ups from talking about sound, frequency, and I'm not going to take everything that we talked about, but gravity, fascia, the way we tune in. So, I mean, I have so many places that I do want to go in this conversation, and part of that is just because I want to know more, but I also kind of am like, I really want to tap into this. I told you a little bit about this, but the reclamation of voice, the reclamation of voices, the time now more than ever for that paradoxical people to speak up, but speak up in a frequency that regulates others. And we need the feminine voice more than ever. We need the dual polar masculine feminine more than ever. But I also think we need the arts more than ever. We need music more than ever. We need um, so many things more than ever. But at the same time, I feel like out of the abundance we flow. And with that, I think we provide such a bridge for people to walk on those different pathways. So I I see your bridging. I see your walking. I don't understand it all yet. I love what I'm seeing. Can you tell me? Oh, I mean, I saw this one clip where I saw you talk about walking near, proximate to Wayne Dyer's, and on the beach, and how you sensed and felt his energy, and it was like 80 feet away, you whoa. And then after he passed away, sorry, after he you walked by him, you and your friend,
Mhm.
like 60 feet away, there was just this field of energy surrounding him. And I just know, I feel even remotely you carry a field around you. When is the first time you knew that field? How early in life were you aware of you or others with that, and sensing into that, if you wouldn't mind starting there?
Wow, what a starting place. That's never been a starting space before. Um, when I was young, I grew up in the Pocahontas era. So I was born in the 90s, so I grew up singing Pocahontas songs and running around barefoot outside and climbing trees and singing songs to the wind. And I think when you're a nature child, you have a different relationship to how you feel in the environment because you become one with it. At some point, it's like the earth begins to trust you and you're part of the earth. Almost like there was no degree of separation. Like my first therapist for sure was like a big oak tree in my
Mm,
yard that I would climb and like, hold onto the branches and then I would sing these songs as loud as I could to the wind. That was like my cathartic expression at the end of a school day for years. I would mow the lawn and I would be shouting songs. Um, so I don't know if I've ever lived without it. I was
mm,
very privileged to be a golfer.
mhm.
Golfers, it, you project your consciousness over a very large course to control something through the wind. And it calibrates you differently. And golfers, there's like this hysterical thing. Do you play?
I have played. I was on a golf team when I was really
Okay.
young, so but
Do
I
you
and not currently.
so do you know the feeling when you are holding somebody up, like you're playing
Mhm. Oh,
slow
yeah.
and you
Oh,
turn
yeah.
around and the people are 250 yards behind you, but you can feel the death
Mhm.
stare?
Mhm.
And there's this, like, sense of panic, like, how is that information expressed to each other except that you're using your electromagnetic field to express either a positive or negative frequency, and golfers, like, hone in on that. It's like you practice not just projecting to your fellow opponents, but you're
Right.
kind of trying to practice telepathy on a ball.
Yeah.
On every par 3 when you're shaping it, you're calling at it. what are you
Mhm.
doing other than like throwing your consciousness across a large area? And then I grew up on a little bit of a property at 3 acres, which is huge if you're from the city and hysterically
Yeah.
small if you're from real farm town.
Uh-huh.
They have like 300 would be like
Mhm.
a small farm.
Right.
So this is like what I call the small ranch. And because of because of the space, because of a yard, you learned how to shout. Like
Mhm.
my whole family, we can project our voices, and I think that all of those things lead you into projecting a big field.
Mm.
And if you grow up in a condo and you've always had apartment buildings, you've always had to play in a public park versus, like what rednecks do. Rednecks have like enormous biofields because they've played with danger and death and
Yeah.
thrown their bodies off of things. So it's like I think with you're athletic and you're dangerous, or you're connected to earth, you're a snowboarder, like to make a magnet stronger, you rub it against another magnet. So like if you the energy of like a team of warriors that started to hike at 5 a.m. up the mountain and then they snowboarded down. Those are people that are powering up in the most visceral way with like organic landscape.
Mm.
Um, so I think that like my biofield's always been big because I've been connected to the earth and singing really loud and really that's still what I do. When my
Yeah.
energy wanes, I just go right back out there and get my
Yeah.
and take it out on the earth.
I I feel like we just went into like these are the top 5 ways to live, and I resonate with a lot of it. I mean, some of I grew up in a small town, and it was like agricultural, and we just had endless fields and endless trails, and yeah. And then now I live in Santa Barbara, and it's smaller, but we have the
Mhm,
beach and the endless horizon of the water, so I tap into that, and wherever
mhm.
I'm at, wherever we have been. Um, there's some people who, like, we just went right in the deep end because we need to. This is the
Yeah.
beauty of where you like, how you formed and what, informed you. Some people will have heard this in the intro, but it's like, yeah, I mean, I wanna end up at you talking about fiber sites because a lot of people still don't know that yet, even though, like, I'm always immersed in the study of fascia for many years, and I love it, I respect it greatly, and I also love when I can come across somebody like you who has put forth a work into the world that's novel, pioneering, so comprehensive, that and to what I know of it yet, that I'm like, there's so much gold in here that is highly instructive for anybody in my airway feeding world that's tuning into this. And I also have like my structural integration hat that I wear with like that deep tissue kind of work. And then I also have like, all those who are um, healers that are expressive artists, and it's all converging in this place of that. But I was thinking of when I used to teach an intuitive movement practice that I created, and I traveled around the world and taught it for a while. And when I was teaching in Singapore, I saw it was like 60 people in one room that I was teaching, um, and there was so much room in the building, but they were all crammed into one small spot. And the first thing I did was I said, you all can space out. They looked at each other really awkwardly, uncomfortably, and nobody moved. And I'm like, okay. In my mind, I thought, well, we got to start back at the beginning. I'm like, in order to go through this flow that I'm going to teach you, you all need a kinesphere. You all need to have a circle around you where you can move freely physically. Therefore, you're going to be able to move more freely emotionally. But in Singapore, everything is vertical, super tall. It's a tiny island. So everybody walks like skyscrapers next to one another with no interconnectedness at all. They are very low in emotional expression, except those of you listening who are like beloved Singaporeans who I know you're some of the most amazing, dynamic people. But I'm just saying, as like you
Culture.
talked about a culture,
Mhm,
and sometimes our environment really influences us. And I saw
mhm.
that kind of like you were talking about city versus
Yeah.
the country.
Yeah, I feel like a frog. If I had to just, like, call myself out, like,
Uh huh.
I think that I'm a frog that experiences, like, water. So my
Mm,
interconnectedness to things is the flow of water. I
Mm,
think, like, all empaths and intuitives, I don't we're not all built the same, and so when
right.
people are like, "Oh, I'm empathic," like, until you meet an empath that mirrors your energy, you don't really know the texture that you experience through like, that's been my experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for me, like, breaking it down into a more natural language or, meeting someone that resonates off of you, for me, I would be like a frog in water. So that's how I perceive like a spider feels the wind and feels the sound through their perception. I think it's like in my work, we increase perception. So, like,
Mm.
perception starts to quickly change, and we need more words for the information that's starting to flow back into the body. It used to be there before, but then we numb our field out. And when we numb our field out, we block ourselves also from magnetic interpretation. And as we start to increase perception, a lot of things get enhanced. And anyway, so we sidetracked. You can ask the
So we
next question.
well, sidetracked is actually on track. I love that you identify as a frog in this empath avatar. I've identified as a sailboat because of harnessing the wind.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
yeah, and then my littlest, he's 5. I really these quick story of like when we were figuring out his name, my office 2.5 acres up in Reading, and out the window it looks like your yard, and it was like every time around 3 or 4 in the afternoon, I was in sessions working on with people, and I would hear the wind blow through our 100 or so trees and the ones around it, and it sounded like the ocean. So I just kept meditating on that. And as this little boy was going to be born, now he's 5 years old, I just thought, I think he's
Hmm,
going to be like the wind and water and the connection between the two. So this is why we named him Zephyr, which means gentle breeze, but his
hmm,
middle name is Rain, which is the water droplets that is like, and he loves those. If he gets in front of wind and water, it could be the windiest day you've ever seen and the hardest rain. He's giddy like somebody who has pure ecstasy.
huh.
And so I feel like he's almost like I'm a student of him in that glee. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's this like wind and water is who I've always been water in life. And so that's why sailboat made sense for wind and water. And then now I feel like I'm entering into a new phase. I used to be a chameleon. That was for self protection and
Hold on, can
survival.
I wanna interrupt you because I don't wanna
Please
forget
do.
this thought. Zephyr should really try at the right age, kite surfing.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. We watching people do that here, and he's really excited about that. So that's so cool that
Yeah.
you said that. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Those
He's
guys have a lot of fun. They have very different built brains and bodies, like some of the people I've met that are kite surfers. It definitely bonds you to the elements like a dragon.
love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So overall, I'm still exploring my next avatar, but I would encourage people who don't know your avatar in the world of life and empathic, if you identify, just tune in to that. But I think, to me, the elements are always some of my best teachers. And while I think like an alchemist who wants to harness the wind, like Santiago in the Alchemist, the book, I also think um, boy, it's like when I'm in that moment, I'm going to ask you a question here, but when some moments when I'm going through all my ways of sensing, feeling into what people need in sessions with body work, and if I ever get to a stuck place, I look out the window and I feel with my eyes closed, or I look and I see what clue that Earth presents, and I usually see something so clear, like something that all of a sudden manifests and it's a limb on somebody's body, and that tells me where to go. And sometimes it is the biggest key for them in their trajectory with whatever we're doing, whether it's healing or preparing them for a tongue tie release or helping them post operatively. So for you, I know you've had like so many muses, history with golf and singing professionally and very skillfully. Your ranch life, these are also many ingredients. What introduced you? I think I've seen some of this, but what introduced you more specifically to the world of fascia?
I hurt my foot and, I couldn't sprint anymore, and I had a PT tell me I was getting old.
Mm,
And, I'm coming off of, just a wild ride of running a chiropractic center with my ex-husband, building up like a really beautiful education community, running an organic spa, having
Mm,
a really graceful divorce, then starting a band, going on tour with a band. Yeah, I did everything I
wow.
wanted, you know? And what do you mean? I'm only 33. I am
Yeah.
not, think I was 32 at the time when I hurt my foot. And I was like, I'm not getting old. Like, what are you talking about? I'm not getting old. So I went to my naturopath, Doctor Bernardo Valero. He's
Mhm,
like a detox specialist, but we've known each other since we were kids, and
mhm,
I trust him because his path has been so authentic. Like, he's really, since we were kids, he's been looking for a better, cleaner, holistic way, and he's certainly found it and really embodies what it is to be a doctor these days, for sure. So I went to him and I'm like, Bernie, what's up with my foot? I have a foot problem. I can't run. I feel like fatty. And he's like, you don't have a foot problem. You have a fascia problem. And I was
mhm,
like, fascia? What are you talking about? I've been in elite athletics my whole life. I've trained with top trainers around the world for like, by the time I was 22, I had 7 years of professional coaching between like what I got access to as a FAU grad, like what my dad introduced me to before, and I had never heard this word fascia.
mhm,
And so I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he put pressure on like a trigger point up my calf, and that trigger point was electrical, and my foot lit up, and I was like, okay. So that's all he said. We were like at a conference. I had invited him. I was running like this HR consultant company at the time, and I had just invited him to be an advisor at the table, and I had brought like a beekeeper and this functional medicine guy like to a corporate event
uh-huh,
before I started musical breathwork. And
right,
so, like, I was just, like, a pro singer that, like, taught some breath work events every month because like, they were good money for me. People really liked the style that I did. And I kind of had the residual business from just being in the area, being a competitive golfer, and having these local events every now and again. But when I hurt my foot, I had to kinda deep dive for the first time in a lot of years since, like, running the clinic. And like I had learned a lot at that point. Like I had been gambling again. As a cart girl, I was like, gambling golf. I was playing with my adrenaline in different ways as a business owner, as a musician, performing. At some points, I was like there was just a lot of events. There was a lot of
mm,
stress that gave me the opportunity to play with adrenaline very consciously as an adult, not just as, like, a first-time pro athlete,
uh-huh,
terrified, gambling money, It's like it was different. So when I dove into fascia, I did what my ex-husband used to do in that I bought every textbook on the subject and I fire hosed the information into my brain. And instead of judging it, instead of trying to understand it, I just kind of let my brain digest it, which is
mm,
how I think a lot of doctors like learn. You get your brain used to like massive quantities of data and then you let the recipes kind of stew. So like this would be equivalent to a chef instead of just making one recipe be reading 12 and then making up your own. So like I read everything I could get my hands on with fascia and then I experimented with all of the techniques that I could afford at that time. And then I ran into some very like logistical concerns with trying to access fascia tools was like there was a pricing constraint. Working with a specialist was pretty pricey, not covered by insurance. There was all these kind of like normal buffers that you run into that everybody runs into when they're like typing in fascia release for the first time. Myofascia therapist was like a huge varying degree. They all had their own sequence and the general consensus was like, "Oh, I have to come back once a week indefinitely." With no real end in sight to like where my scar tissue was and like what actually athletically was going on. So, there was some experimentation and I got some serious relief with myself. My hip click stopped for the first time in forever. I was born with like an internally rotated right foot. So my hip has clicked since I could walk. And I've had bursitis a lot in college, like a pretty inflamed hip. So like that was a real core issue for me. So when my foot hurt, I was like, this is the second part of my body now that kind of feels like it's way older than I am. Um, but it went away, and I thought that was pretty amazing, like, my plantar fasciitis went away, my hip click went away, And I had been exploring. I kind of hurt myself a couple times. I started to explore on my boyfriend. I was like, "Hey, will you try these sequences with me?" I played with different types of like, props and tools, and I was kind of piecing together my own baker's recipe, which is like common when you're an athlete because you have to build your training sequences, and if you're more clocked and regimented than the next person, you gain an edge. So I didn't think I was doing anything novel. I was just doing exactly what every pro athlete does, and that's, you build your. In my opinion, this was my first recovery sequence because all of the PTs just give you ice and heat, and then they wrap your wrist, or they wrap your hip, and then they give you a painkiller. But with golf, you can't wrap your hip. Like you're done. If you can't move your
Yeah.
hip, you have no power. You're just suffering out there. So it was pretty remarkable for me to relieve the hip pain. But when I started introducing it to my clients, adjacent with my breath work, because like those were the clients I had. I didn't have
Yeah.
any fascia clients. I only just
Right.
had breath work clients. When I bonded the 2 sequences, there was a huge change in the brainwaves. And the way that I'm measuring this is just by like, as a breathwork teacher for a decade, you can tell when people are fidgeting at the end of your class. They're like itchy, they're ready to go. It's been an hour, they're anxious to get up. And I think that like always 30%, 50% of my class was kind of ready when class was ended. They were ready to go. When I added the fascia flow, 100% crashed out, like got into that deep,
Mm,
deep theta state.
mhm,
Some would pass through to delta and fall asleep for a little while. And I was
mhm,
like, oh, whoa, that was like a magic potion. It was like all of a sudden my breath work became like, like amplified, as if their body needed to be kind of propriocept backed into itself. The tension had to be relieved for the breath to truly pump. So I started playing with like breath first, then the fascia flow first, then the breath, then nighttime classes, then daytime classes. And I watched how the 2 training sequences, mighty breath only takes 10 minutes, fascia flow,
mhm,
the whole lower body sequence is less than 75. So I could teach a 90-minute class and basically cover all the science I need to in about 15 minutes for you to just execute the sequence and not hurt yourself, but then allow your internal awareness to drop into the body and then just play instruments. So as I like experimented on like different groups of 20 people at a time, 80 people at a time, 10 people at a time, but they're all athletes. I got to see the patterns that we all really share in common because of our sitting posture. So like during the fascia flow, there's this coordinated sequence where you're feeling, instead of a massage therapist, you're feeling into the body. And we're using a ball to basically replicate the elbow. And the difference between like a melt method or like a foam roller is it's so much surface area that
mhm,
you are going to like, you're definitely going to move the blood, you're definitely going to move the lymph, you're definitely going to feel the nerves. And that might be the perfect place for some people to start, just in that kind of access. But as an athlete, I needed, deep tissue restoration, and I needed my spring loaded feeling back. I wasn't here for shallowness. I was here to get to the bone. And to do that, we need something with a much smaller surface area because the major fascia bands that are holding the structure in place are 2 to 3 inches wide. So anything that's bigger than a softball isn't going to be able to slip between those, which really matters when we talk about like your upper leg, which is where a lot of athletes have,
mhm,
some sort of scar tissue or tear in the past that can create asymmetry in our joints. And like that's really was my concern when I initially got into this work was, why is it that my right hip has aged 30 years compared to my left hip? Why? Like, how can I not fix this? I'm an athlete that's rebuilt my body 3 times over. Like, what do you mean I can't fix my joint tension? Like, it doesn't. I mean, my right leg's not shorter. Had all these conversations with doctors, like trying core because they would just give me anti-inflammatories. That was always their solution. And I'm like, you guys, like I train hard. You're not looking at me like a what I am. um, so the fascia flow was kind of born out of these frustrating experiences and like my desire to just like put something in my backpack that I could take with me traveling. as a as a touring musician, you don't get to bring a big tool. You don't get to bring a big Baosu ball. You don't get to bring your your sexy yoga wheel. You can only you already have the instruments. You only get what's in your backpack. So a ball became this kind of prime tool for me, and it's like it's the most lightweight, it's the most efficient, it's able to get between the major fascia bands, and it could be brutal for people that are very out of shape and their lymph and their plasma are very stuck. But for athletes that want to have the deep compression, the deep relief within our, all of the tissue that's wrapping the bone, to bring that balance and symmetry back to our spring loadedness, that's all they need. And with this Baker recipe, and it's funny to me because like stretching, some people love stretching, some people hate stretching. Well, why? Well, if you don't follow certain protocols, like if your body's dehydrated and you just like rip into a stretch, that's like gonna kind of tear brittle
Mhm,
parts of your fascia apart and it's gonna feel
mhm.
sore the next day. And that's
Yeah.
why some people go into yoga and without an understanding of fascia, they're just gonna, kind of have a good or a bad experience. But if you're hydrated, if you're in a warmed up environment, which is why yin yoga inside of a or hatha or hot yoga, wherever they call it in your guys' part of the world.
Mhm.
When you add heat and you add hydration and then you stretch, that's a very different effect on your joints. But like being hypermobile, having surgeries, all of these things create major issues in the kinetic chain of our fascia. And to do my method is a gentle compression release. It's like the way that we can get into the deep fascia and activate the fascia sites. So I'm sorry, the fiber sites. So inside of the deep fascia, which is why I really think like as soon as people can get past a foam roller, get past a foam roller because you're not doing any deep work. You're just kind of moving fluids around the body, but we're not engaging any of the deep cells that allow the fluids to become spring loaded. So it's like closer we get to the sponge, the concept that we are just rivers moving inside of a sponge sack, the better our ability will be to adapt to what our body's asking for. So often we're taught to like, oh, you got to stretch, you got to warm up. But what does that actually mean? It means pumping the rivers of fluid so everything is like hot and circulated. But a lot of people don't they think that they can warm up with stretching. And then you hear online, you're like, oh, stretching is bad. And it's like, it's not that stretching is bad. It's that certain conditions should be met within the rivers of the sponge in order for things to be elastic again. And like literally, I think a sponge is going to be the best way that we teach children this. Like if we got the sponge completely like it's dry, if I go to stretch it right now, you're going to hear it fight.
Mhm.
And that's how like you hear the person stretching, they're like,
Right.
"Ugh."
You hear that aching. Yeah.
Yes, and it's we can use more gentle ways to create hydration within these fluids to get them to move around and be less stagnant, and then also to palpate them deeply. Because even though we don't know what type of fluid runs in between the nanotubules of the fascia, the fluid that runs in between them that we have this abundance of as kids is hyaluronic acid, and the fibrocytes make hyaluronic acid. So if we just continue to activate the fiber sites, as long as we don't have like lymphedema, as long as we don't have like really sensitive tissues like EDS, and there's other modifications I can make for those. But like if we have good, healthy tissue, when we use this baker's recipe, we start we start to correct the tension, just like learning to tune an instrument. And I've simplified it by having us move from the ground up. And that simplification just comes from how our tensegrity is as a structure and as a body.
Yeah.
So I don't know how deep you want to get into that,
Well,
but
I would yeah, there's so much loaded in what you said to start us off, which is so good because you touched on things that I was, really wanting to dive into, and I would love to go to gravity. It's something I do a lot of work with in my sessions, and, 'cause you just went into from the ground up, and I know you were gonna go somewhere, but I would love that. Um I tell people, like, when I'm working with them, I'm like, has somebody worked on this organ in this position or that position or this position?
Huh.
And I'm like, well, the only time that that thyroid gland misaligns on your baby is when they're in tummy time. So all the you've met with the greatest body workers I know. The only thing I would say is if they didn't check your baby in prone position, the right kidney and the thyroid misalign, that's what tightened the floor of the mouth. So that's why you couldn't get that floor of mouth loosened in relationship to their tongue tie journey. So I always teach parents how to do this work for their babies so they can see it, and so it's like magic before their eyes when the things melt. And so I'm always like experimenting with people, putting them in different gravity positions or inverting
Mm.
them at a 45-degree inverted to see what happens to their body. The discovery process is really cool. um, and that's what I'm doing more one-to-one, sometimes with groups. But in your to kind of like jump back to you for a moment with what you're teaching and showing. I'd love to hear, yeah, you talk to us a little bit about gravity from how you see it, because we were talking about this a little bit. Anyways, so tell me about gravity as you see it.
That's so well, I'm gonna take it in a very different direction than earlier. I tell my clients often to go inverted
Hmm.
because, like, when we think about gravity within the body, right? Our body is supported by the 26 bones within our feet, and then the major fascia bands, and how the tension of those major fascia bands are from the bottom to the top, and if it's balanced on either side, and then if it's balanced from front to back. So, like, most people don't have balanced posture. Um, Everybody kind of falls into this one position, and it's like their front line kind of becomes concave and contracted, and their
Hmm.
back line becomes expanded. But then everybody has that back pain, but that's the stretching of the
Hmm.
fascia, not the tension of the fascia. Everything's trying to calibrate. So this is Project X. This is one of the first tensegrity sculptures that was made by Kenneth Snelson, but me and my uncle
Cool.
replicated it.
Wow.
And what I like to show people here is if and this is not a good model, but I have a new
Yeah.
model being made. I'm very
Okay.
excited about it. So imagine if this was the hips, the bottom and the top, right? And let's say that you're an athlete like me. There's a string right here, and you have three different tears on this one leg. Right, because you were born and your foot was internally rotated and
Hmm.
your toe dexterity was kinda compromised on the side, so your parents didn't know about myofascial release, so when my joint was developing, it developed internally rotated. So all of the fascia was kind of bent into this shape that kept pulling my hip down, right? And so my body compensates by making this shoulder tight. So then I go into the therapist and I'm like, "Hey, my shoulder feels tight." I don't say, "Hey, my hamstring has been torn 3 times, but it happened a decade ago." We just talk about the pain that we feel because these nerves have died off a long time ago. They're no longer signaling because your body never wants to keep you in pain. So, like, the point of origin is always the consequence that we're often feeling, unless it's like blunt trauma. So when we start making tensegrity models, we can get into the fact that pain is a global consequence, not a local consequence. And the upper body is fixated as so many fascia release mechanisms are with correcting neck issues and shoulder issues. Like there's some literally just devoted to lock shoulders, and trying to release locked shoulders. And it's like in my theory, in experience is like most of the time locked shoulders is happening because somewhere in the glute or hamstring, there's so much tension that it's just chronically pulling down the hip, and then the upper body is trying to compensate because our brain needs to stay horizontal. Cerebral spinal fluid is that tidal flow that needs to stay horizontal, so everything is fixated around keeping the eyes level and the brain level. So the whole posture is compensated around that, yet we're still not looking at asymmetrical tension, particularly when it builds up in athletes that have tears. And if
Hmm.
tears start to compound on one side and then the joint goes out, is it because my joints let out or is it because I never properly recovered from the scar tissue? It becomes kind of logical when we start to see the skeleton as a tensegrity sculpture and you're like, "Oh, our joints are not these like separated things. They're grown together. And it's like if you have a tree, I love this metaphor. First time I'm trying it out. Let me know if it lands.
Yeah.
And a tree has a vine that grows up it. And as that vine grows up it and it starts to get bigger and bigger, it starts to weigh down the hair, so to speak, of the tree. And then the tree slowly but surely starts to like bend. That's how I see asymmetrical fascia tension.
Mm,
When it builds up on the major fascia lines, it's like you won't see it immediately, but slowly over time, everything in your body starts to compensate for and what my case was my right hip. And then when I restored that right hip and I restored the flow of fluids through there and I straightened things out and balanced it, it's like the next thing you know, I can run like I did as a kid. I have no joint pain. I have no inflammation after workouts. My recovery time is less. Was I just dealing with, stuck fascia tension all the way through my professional career and just dealing with like bursitis and inflammation and all these things were caused from the fact that my tissues had never healed. There was these buildup and stagnation because I was stressing it out because I had never fully recovered. So it's a real missing link in elite
mhm.
athletics. The recovery, they do not build you to recover, they build you to burn out at 28. And, um, being a pro athlete is cool. Most people never, make more than 100K ever. Like, there's so many pro athletes I interview, and they're like, "I made 60K, and I'm just so happy I can do my sport." Like, there's no post-retirement plan. There's a bunch of great athletes out there that are Uber drivers that are like, "I was not supported with recovery. Now my knees are shot." And anyway, it's been fun to get some people out of retirement.
I love your concepts, and I feel like so many resonances or resonant with so much of the way you think. I think it's because although I, have lived for 9 years in this category of airway and feeding specialist, helping babies to adults with tongue tie, right? That's my like unique niche that I've been like zone of genius focusing in, or whatever people say when you focus on that 10,000 hours, that whole thing, Malcolm Gladwell, right?
Mhm.
So that's what I've done. But before that, I was supporting women prenatal, postpartum. Um, and then that's what led to the discovery of tongue tie with babies, my own, 9 years ago, born with a tongue tie. So that was a huge thing. But before that, I worked with so many athletes, countless tennis players, hundreds of tennis players in a really small stretch of time, um, many dancers, many like professional dancers that performed much in New York, a lot of theater, a lot of singers. So a lot of athletes who are using your bodies in a way like I have amateur, theater, dance. I'm a movement artist because that's these are what define me. But I'm never taken it to a certain level. I've just enjoyed them. When I have people like you who've come in and the people that you've been able to help, like they're utilizing their body in a maximum capacity way that is because they are competing not only with themselves but with others. And so I see those areas where their tissues break down. I see the kinetic chain disruption. So I had to experiment. What is going to help these people when they've been to so many others? So in that way, I think like you, because you've seen the algorithm, the pattern recognition of like, yeah, these things out there are doing something, but from your unique perspective of inside out athlete and singer, you saw some things work. I had enough to know, why am I not seeing anything help these people? So, going into so many other areas with how are they doing in nature? Are they getting enough? Are they emitting sound enough, right? I love your post about humming. I love your post about where the tongue goes when you hum, because I've so totally navigated that with myself and guiding others. And like, we are musical instruments, so therefore are we not activating ourselves to be alive and awake and resound with sound and all the other things. So kind of like my way to like take this down to earth and kind of conclude here is that, um, as a lateral thinker who's seeing people struggle, want them to get better, I'm not comfortable with or okay of doing what's out there, because even though I have studied under some of the greats and I love their work, I It's nothing like a daughter being born at 9, like 9 years ago with a tongue tied to where I'm like, I'm doing the things, nothing's working. So then I got downloads and downloads, and I would see what my body was doing days later, and out of that came my floor of the mouth flow and protocol and what I do and teach others. And I'm like, that was a better teacher to me because that was tuned into what the people before me needed from a source that's beyond myself, and one that if I don't tap into, I'm very limited, and I love the things that are out there. And I know that you pay great homage to people like Tom Myers with Anatomy Trains and some others that have, thank God for these people that have set the stage for us. So now I think unexpectedly, I want to go in a direction with you where it's like, in order to go where people really need us to go, I really feel like if we're tapping into intuition, if we're tapping into intro and exteroception, our antennae can be available to perceive what the needs are beyond a tissue level. And I love how you talk about that, that fascia is not about tissues, it's about way more than that. So, in one way, I would love to hear you talk about that. In another way, I would love to hear you talk about like, w- how do you narrow down, you know, so much across a wide spectrum of resources, modalities, techniques. When it comes to you working with somebody, how do you, your intuition guides you, but how do you sense and tune in to what they need amidst all the things that you think they could benefit from?
Wow, okay. Well, I don't love, working one-on-one with people as much as I love giving them the education and
Yeah.
giving them the training because it's a nuanced and subtle practice that
Hmm.
chronologically compounds within the body. So, like, if you come in, you work with me one time, you're gonna get some new experiences, and that's cool. But if you train my program for 6 weeks, we're gonna double your lung capacity, and
Hmm.
we're gonna soften the tension in your lower body, and we're gonna start changing joint tension.
Hmm.
So, I'm so much more privy to have people start training with my digital courses
Yeah.
because it's like that's so it's hours more than I can give you in a one-on-one, and it's foundational, and then, 6 weeks after that, come and meet with me, and then we can go over whatever you want one-on-one, but and that's why I put my membership there, is for
Yeah.
people who, like, want to train with all of the things, because in the beginning, people find me for body pain,
Right.
they find me for respiratory illness, but
Hmm.
when you start to train the inputs of the nervous system, which is breath rate and body tension, we start to increase all of your awareness there. We literally start to change our consciousness,
Yeah.
because when your lung capacity doubles, right? Because we're training it, we're detoxing it, we're expanding your lung capacity. The consequence of that is that your natural breath starts to divide in half. When that happens, your brainwave shifts. There's like longer pauses between times. Your lymph starts to move better. You wake up with
Mm-hmm.
a little different circulation behind your head. All of a sudden, your frontal lobe is working a little bit better. Where you used to be froggy brained is kind of cleared out. So, like 2 weeks into training, you really know what it's like to wake up with clear sinuses and like there's no post nasal drip. So there's like a sense of clarity that comes back. And then as we start to activate the toes and get your toes back online, grounding means something different because you're not afraid to have perception on the bottom of your feet because we've been kind of denumbing your feet for a few weeks at a time. All of these tiny little awarenesses, as we build them up and we start to create compression within the tissues, we start to reestablish the rhythm. Your whole body is starting to move, which is kind of big for people that are overweight, that want to get in shape, that are
Hmm.
feeling the sluggishness of like, oh, I want to work out, but like literally my body hurts. What's step one for those people? And to me, it's like, well, and it's the same for pro athletes. Pro
Hmm.
athletes that have been retired for 2 years and they're like, I'm out of shape, and they're not for the average person, but they are though. And like they have deep issues. They've built muscles on top of scar tissue, which is hard to get back. Like we kind of have to get back into the body. But the sequence for people who are overweight trying to get in shape and the sequence for pro athletes that are trying to recover from an old injury is the same. And it's like I suggest 3 months of steady saunaing and fascia flow and mighty breath. And it's like one of the first dominoes that we can push. EDS
Mm,
people too, because when the lymph is stuck within the body, which is big if you're recovering from scar tissue, we want to make sure that everything is like nourished and moved. When the lymph is stuck, everything feels like work. It's not fun to work out. It feels like labor. And people that go into a sauna and they're sore the next day, that's like a very big indicator that their blood pH is super acidic. They're drinking too much soda normally. And those people, they can get, a box of pH strips and test their first urine like midstream in the morning and work their way back up to neutral. And like any of my clients that are addicted to energy drinks and soda, that's like my first homework assignment to them. Cause it's like if we can rebalance your blood flow and then just get you pump and sweat for 3 months, like you're gonna be a different you're gonna be ready for level two then. Then we can have another conversation. But it's like creating a flow where everything is sweating again and releasing, and then we're replacing it with super good water. We're recalibrating the blood. We're getting the nervous system toggled in with breath rate because we're building elasticity. We're teaching a shape, which is very different than counting. Counting drove me mad. I can't believe people teach with the counting, but like a shape frees the mind, frees the brain waves. Um, so that's how I start to play with presence. So
mm,
when people get out of pain is when they really make a choice with me. So like
yeah.
a percentage of my clients drop off as soon as their pain stops. And then I'll get an email from them like a few months in, like, hey, my knee pain came back. I'm like, yeah, because you haven't been training. You ready to get back on it. And it only takes a few weeks for them to get right back
Hmm.
to where they were because it's just like brushing your teeth, you know? Um, so my job is to get them to fall in love with the routine, and that looks different for each person. And some people, they have all the time in the world and some people don't, so we kind of modify things. There's some shortcuts I've learned along the way, but like 18 minutes 3 days a week is basically the minimum for people to get really, solid results. So it's been fun, like but when the pain is gone, there's this opportunity to talk about presence and magnetism. And the people that come to me because they're a performer or an athlete or they're a business owner and they put themselves under a lot of adrenaline. They push themselves under a lot of pressure. Um, those are the people I get the most excited to work with because we can take everything that they're learning within my programs and kind of increase the aperture around the moments of adrenaline.
Mm,
And there's, some physiological processes that we can put ourselves through as adrenaline is being poured through our system, and you're vasodilating and your skin is flushing, your heart rate is increasing. When you have a breath shape, a mighty breath shape and a fascia flow, and you know how to open your toes, you know how to slow your breath rate down to 2 to 4 breaths a minute with the adrenaline being dumped in, it's kind of like doing medicine sober. You open the aperture of all of your senses, all of your magnetism, and then when you walk out on stage, you have everybody facing their attention on you, and it's like up to you on if that moment's going to bring you paralysis or
hmm.
amplification.
Yeah.
And like that dial there hits every single pro athlete and pro performer and business leader. And I
Yeah.
really like helping people through those junctures because those are moments of time that change your future, So to be prepared for the onslaught of adrenaline is I think where we can calibrate to our higher potential.
Mm,
And there's a
love
lot
that.
of programs out there that kind of teach a spastic nature. And like I've read so many sports psychology books on golf, very only one really talks about a breath pattern.
Hmm.
And, so I think it's a very overlooked mechanism
Yeah.
in sport and performance psychology,
It's so good, and I feel like you said it there when you started talking about like business leaders, and then I'll say, and then I have another question, but I'll say there's just like who isn't this applicable to? Because like you could have a stand-up comedian, you could have a parent of kids trying to navigate a fight, you could have me getting up there and presenting wherever I present. You could have like the school teacher that it's like you have this opportunity to corral and become and set up a way that you can be way more present. So it's like you're talking about things that are obviously really amazing for high performers, and yet who isn't like we can all perform really highly, and some of us we're all navigating this struggle and also a beautiful opportunity to navigate that autonomic system of stress. And when hormetic stress, good stress, becomes debilitating and negative, and cortisol spikes. So I really love the hormonal parts of what you just talked about, and the resilience from a psychology perspective, but also from like real life, nitty gritty daily life. And I think your like statement there somewhere at the end of what you were saying, which is like you love helping people with this. And I'm like, yeah, clearly you have worked at this, but you're also given um, such an interesting like blend of understandings, like growing up on this expansive place where you had the physical space to shout, and it was like you were privy to that. Actually, I love the way you said that. Whereas some people grow up in a tiny space and don't actually get to know what their sound sounds like. So from early on, your voice can carry, and it will, and it is today. So in that, I want to like ask you this question that I really want to know kind of a little bit more of, as a way to learn more about you and for other people to like glean this. But I want to know what your personal legend is, and by that, like what do you put on this planet to do? Your destiny, calling. What have you provoked to do? There's two parts to that. I've told you that Alchemist is one of my favorite books and stories, and I think you were saying you've enjoyed it. And um, the old king, early in the book, the old king tells Santiago, the shepherd, um, when he comes, Santiago is the boy that the whole story is about, and his journey to learn about how to pursue his dream. But the old king says to Santiago, the universe conspires in your in the universe conspires in your favor when you are in pursuit of your personal legend. So, number one, I want to hear, what is that for you, Brooke, that you've identified?
Bring merriment
Mm,
everywhere I go, singing and dancing. So, we are musical instruments, and I hope to be people's gateway drug back into singing.
mm,
Um, like, the dancing the Fascia Flow is fun because I feel like it's helping people dance again. Like, I have a bunch of pro
yeah,
dancers now that have
yeah, I
found me,
love
which
that.
is fun. But, when we learn how to breathe right, it becomes very natural to sing again.
Hmm.
The rarest instrument in the world is our own voice.
Yes.
So, the way that our hard and soft palates are put together, the way that our resonators are in our head, the way that we throttle our sound with either, weak pressure or strong pressure, that's the most glorious thing to bring back to people. And, musical breathwork is called musical breathwork because I think life is meant to be a musical. I think it's meant to be kind of like merry, just a
Yeah.
lot more silly than it currently feels, but that sense of, like, heaven, like women holding hands around a fire and, like,
Hmm.
with flowers in their hair, and they're just grateful to be alive, like, that's
I love that.
exists within us if we can tap into that, but we first have to elevate past pain. We first
Yeah.
have to elevate past, shirking responsibility and being a victim of the systems that we are in, inventing the systems that we would prefer to exist in. I think it could be a real, like, peaceful, harmonious change of path. Um, to that reality, and, like, I really want musical breathwork to be so much bigger than me. Like, my team is my family, and, like, I feel like we're all holding a hula hoop and then trying to
Mm,
pull on it at the same time. It's not Brooke centric by any means. It's this concept of, you know, can we fine tune the body instrument and then just stretch on that? Because
ooh,
if we can
I
get the
love that.
paradigm back of we are instruments and we're built to be mighty, that's a kind of like a it's such a pure space to be in. There's no
Mhm.
projection, there's no manipulation. It's just like giving the next generation the tool set that calibrates your nervous system under pressure, which I think is a beautiful gift to give to the next people. And I'm hoping that when we really master this, we can resonate to that freedom of playfulness, that glee that your son has. He has that because he's free of the pain of the present and trainable state of mind. And we can if we don't train that state of mind within ourselves, it will be full of chaos because we are better consumers when we're full of chaos. We are better taxpayers when we're full of
Right.
chaos, better insurance buyers when we're full
Yep.
of chaos. So,
Mhm.
the sovereignty of mind, of like taking back our energy and attention and housing it into our literal body and increasing that awareness. I think that's the way through is the way in.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Oh, it's so good. And yeah, there's so much there. Oh, so oh, yeah. No, I was gonna say, like, I love that image of a hula hoop. Save a spot on the hula hoop. I'm coming to just hang out with you guys at some point, because I love your vision. I love it, and I feel like I knew some of that or sensed it, but didn't know it to that detail for sure. And hearing it from your own mouth and seeing how there's the merriment that you talk of is is really beautiful. And I feel like, you know, I started with theater and song, and that took me out of a shell. The littlest version of this is that, you know, I grew up in people in the fourth grade who had been with me since kindergarten. When in the fourth grade I said something out loud, they're like, "That's the first time I ever heard you talk." I was very quiet, I was very
Mm,
numb, a lot of trauma. So but I remember in high school when I sang in public for the first time, and then all of a sudden I was in a musical. I was myself, reborn, uncovered, out of a shell, and I began to exist in a way that I never knew I could. And then
mm.
it's been a journey ever since. And so song is one of the first things that helped me know who I am. And it is now again, I return in a way to it, especially in the last little bit here. So I feel like it's fitting too that I'm getting to meet with and spend time with you who has this great vision because I see how what my work has been is really, I'm a big fan of helping people in what I've done, but I'm in the midst of seeing like, yep, there's something coming. And so to be around musical breath work, to be around you, Brooke, and to like hear your vision is inspiring. And I'm excited. So yeah, hula hoop, save a spot. I'm gonna hang out with you at some point. But I wanna also make sure I ask the second part of this question, and I feel like you answered it, so you can just say whatever. But how do you know you're
Oh,
how did you know merriment and song, and how did you know that? Which, you know, the legend on a map has symbols that tell you you're this far along. So for anybody out there that's like, how do you know? What is the way that you kind of currently tune into that? Is it just
I'm
automatic
so
at this point?
no, I'm so happy that you asked. I think that intuition exists in the electrostatic body.
Mm,
So when you get goosebumps, right? What is that other than
mhm,
electrical voltage being elicited from whatever conversation or thought or moment that you're having, right? So those electrostatic thoughts are real, they're visceral. It
mhm,
tells you that there's more voltage in the air.
mhm,
So I think that the first thing I do is I listen to voltage always. So
mm,
voltage comes with enthusiasm.
Mhm.
Enthusiasm in the Webster dictionary means possession by God.
Mm.
It's an
Yeah.
incredible if you just take a moment and,
Oh,
like,
that's good.
draw up with the last time you had enthusiasm, that is when the faucet of voltage, the faucet of life is hitting you. That is
Mhm.
a great sign that you are in the river of in this complex system of life, you are in the river you are meant to stand in. Some people have the privilege of standing in that faucet and staying there forever, and the faucet
Mhm.
never moves. Other people, that faucet moves every 3 months whether they like it or not, no matter how
Mhm.
long it took them to find
Yeah, yeah.
it. The way that I organize infinite choice is through something I call Stargate. So there's 3
Mm.
systems that I have to access my intuition. One
Okay.
is always listening to voltage,
Uh-huh.
2 is following my Stargate, and
Okay.
3 is always honoring my archetypes.
Yeah.
So the archetypes is I did the Carolyn Mace practice. So there's 12 archetypes and then I've meshed it with my astrological wheel. So it's
Okay.
literally like a roadmap for me of
Mhm.
how I feel grounded, what I value, how I'm supposed to dress and express, where I build my energy when I've lost it, how I gain my energy if I want to explode it, where I point my energy into the universe, how I'm supposed to direct that energy seamlessly with the people around me. So I have a label for each of these aspects of how the rays of light move through us. And I build my schedule around that. Now, that's been happening since I was 21.
Mhm.
So the archetypal process is very intrinsic. You do it one time and it's like a birthday, and you get really familiar with taking the fractal aspects of our schizophrenic souls in kind of creating a boardroom where you acknowledge aspects of yourself. And most people have forgotten part of their soul, like in their 20s. You know, they're not an artist anymore, but they used to be. They're not an athlete anymore, but they used to be. But those are pieces of your soul that brings you nourishment. So by labeling them and giving them all a place at a table, you only get 12. So it's very difficult to pick them. You kind of go through this distillation journey of like witnessing yourself and witnessing what others have projected upon you and like witnessing who your community is, because we all play a part in a balanced community, just like my bees. The bees are operating on millennial old algorithms, so is humanity. We all play a part. There's like 136 jobs in the community. And to feel balanced and whole, we have to have all of those different archetypes in our community, in our clans, so that we diversify, so that we, it gets to exchange and learn from each other. Every clan has a clown, every clan has a king, a queen, and a fool. So if we get familiar with our archetypes and we sit back and say, this is who I am, this is how I'm supposed to show up, this is how I build my and conjure my energy, right? Then how do we make our next choice when there's infinite choices? Like, oh, I'm going to choose the thing that brings me love, or I'm going to choose the thing that's, easy. To me, everything in the infinite, right? As a golfer, when you're hitting a shot, you're choosing a trajectory that you're trying to shape a ball through. So, when we get into the next D, it's not
Mhm.
linear or lateral.
Yeah.
It's going to be triangles and circles. So
Mhm.
to me, it's 3 points. So each choice, and I love doing this with like recommending partners and boyfriends and girlfriends to do this. Like if you're doing any project, if you picked 3 characteristics that you wanted to share, which is classic clan structure, by the way, like a shield would have like 3 different symbols and a slogan that bonds them. Um, so, like, for instance, the way that I make decisions is it has to feel good, has to feel divine, and it has to feel simple.
Mhm.
And, like, I have really elaborated with myself of what feel good means. It doesn't
Right.
just feel good logically, it feels good in my body, feels
Mhm.
right in my soul. So even though if it feels good logically, but it doesn't feel right in my body, we're gonna hold back on that decision.
Mhm.
You know? Does that decision feel good, but it's very complex? That's probably not the right decision. So it's like you give yourself this degree of variance with an infinite choice when you define a Stargate, and that Stargate can be huge. It can be small. It can be as you can change it all the time. You can, have your own for yourself. But I think that there is a roadmap to staying in alignment with your intuition. And I think 4 times a year to do kind of an internal pilgrimage, whatever that looks like for you. If it's a silent retreat for a weekend, if it's 6 hours on the beach with your homie, whatever that looks like. I think 4 times a year, we should touch base with the deepest part of our ether. I think that we should operate with stargates, particularly when we're making choices with partners so that we're jumping into the same dimension with similar expectation and attachment. I think that makes projects and shifts a lot gentler on both psyches. And we use these to calibrate our frequency. Our frequency, if we dial it, if we look at it like a complex machine, all of these different dials allow us to stay stable within a very complex structure. And, as the planets change, as the magnetics shift, there's always going to be oscillations. That's what we will never stop. So the more stable you can run your ship, the more tools you have to calibrate, the easier the patterns will be for you to exist through.
Woo! Power packed. That was awesome. Oh my gosh. I just want to stand up. I want to cheer. Like, this was so good. I just went everywhere you went. I'm going to go there again. I'm like, that was so I love it. Now we need to like bend time because I'm like, we're right at our deadline here. 1 minute left, hard stop. So I want to make sure we conclude here, hang out after we end recording so we can make sure logistics happen, but it's going to be quick. Really, like, you just opened up a world that I'm like, okay, now we got to go in there. It's great. Everybody, you'll go through that portal that Brooke just took you on, and whew, it's going to be good. So I know you can, people will follow you. If those of you who don't, if everybody knows, like, growing awareness of what your work is, but Musical Breathwork, is that the best place for people to go to learn more about you and all that you
Yeah.
do? And then any
Musical
last?
Breathwork yeah, musicalbreathwork.com has all my course offerings. If you're like, "I want everything," join the membership. That gives you access to me, all my stuff, and then everything, all my podcasts that I come out with. Then, my Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, it's all Musical Breathwork. The YouTube I'm becoming quite proud of. It's a space of very interesting thinkers, very long conversations around, different frameworks and perspectives, lots of singers. There's some,
Mhm,
like, crazy treasure nuggets from the singers that I've
mhm,
interviewed, some stuff
mhm,
I've never heard before. Truvian
mhm.
throat singers to opera singers to pop coaches, learning something new from each of them. And like we live in the information age, so this is our time to exchange and to really level up. And I think that we're breaking free from linear thinking. This is not good. This is not bad.
Mhm,
It's a
mhm.
gradient. And our ability to adapt within different gradients. If you're in the ghetto, to be in the ghetto. If you're in the luxury hotel, be in the luxury hotel. There's no frequency that are good as and bad. There's an
Right.
adaptability, and then we get to choose the dimension that we want to experience. So armoring ourselves with the tools is what I'm here for, whether that's on the professional stage or just getting out of body pain. And thanks for having me on. This was a delightful conversation.
Yeah, I loved it. Oh my gosh. Can't wait to hear it again. And yeah, so please, comments, any of you out there who where to go to find out more about Brooke and her offerings, and love it if you comment and share this. And yeah, thanks for this conversation. I'm lit up and I loved it. Thank you for listening to the Compromise to Alchemized podcast. Really excited to thank Jessica from Lunalux for the music, this track called Major. I want to thank Toshi, who originally did the design work for my cover art. And then I also want to thank Alyssa from my team for podcast publishing, my whole team, including Kat, for heading up my world. And then also definitely want you all to follow me on YouTube, follow the podcast on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcast. Comment, give us a rating, and also follow me on Instagram at Dr. Neil Bulchandani so you can stay tuned to my latest. Thanks so much, and you have an amazing day.
This is major.